There are moments in life when everything seems fine, when nothing feels threatened, and yet a single conversation quietly changes the direction of things. It doesn't shake you, it just makes you think, and sometimes that's where everything begins to shift. David didn't come from money, he came from trying, from days that looked the same, from waking up before the sun, driven more by necessity than ambition. In his early 20s, life didn't feel dramatic, it felt narrow. He rented a single room with peeling paints and a fan that worked only when it felt like it. Power outages were normal. Hunger wasn't a stranger, just something he managed quietly. He didn't complain much, mostly because complaining didn't change anything. What he had was discipline. Every morning, he woke up with a plan, not a motivational plan, a survival one. He kept notebooks filled with figures that didn't look impressive to anyone else. Small profits, losses, projections that barely stretched beyond the next few months. His friends took shortcuts. Some joined trends that promised fast money. Others borrowed recklessly. A few chased connections. David didn't. He believed in slow growth because that was the only thing he understood. He built his business the same way someone builds muscle. Repetition, patience, pain. Some days, nothing moved. Some months, he barely broke even. There were times he considered quitting, just silently, lying on his thin mattress at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if effort was supposed to feel this unrewarding. But every morning, he got up anyway. He learned how to negotiate without sounding desperate. He learned how to say no to deals that felt wrong, even when his bank balance begged him to say yes. He learned how to delay gratification, how to watch others live loudly while he stayed quiet. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't inspirational, it was steady. Years passed like that, slowly, and then, without fanfare, things began to shift. A client paid on time, then another, then referrals started coming without him chasing them. The numbers in his notebook changed, not dramatically at first, just enough for him to notice. David didn't celebrate early. He had trained himself not to trust small wins. He waited, he watched, he let consistency prove itself. By the time he allowed himself to believe it, the breakthrough had already settled in. He moved out of the single room into a modest apartment. Nothing flashy, just clean, quiet, predictable. He bought a car, not luxury, reliable. The kind of car you buy when you value function over attention. And for the first time in his adult life, he slept without anxiety sitting on his chest. Money stopped feeling like an emergency. He paid his bills early. He helped his mother more comfortably. He stopped checking his account balance every night before sleeping. Success didn't explode into his life. It arrived calmly. That was what made him feel safe. David didn't change much as his business grew. He didn't suddenly become loud or arrogant. If anything, he became more careful. He hired slowly. He expanded cautiously. He reinvented more than he spent. People around him started calling him lucky. He hated that word. They didn't see the years when nothing moved. They didn't see the deals he walked away from. They didn't see the nights he doubted himself but showed up anyway. Luck had nothing to do with it. This was earned. And with stability came something else David hadn't allowed himself to imagine too early: the future. He began planning properly, planning with intention: a bigger home, a proper office space, a wedding. His fiancée had been with him through the lean years. She knew the version of David that counted coins, the version that postponed dates, the version that apologized for not being able to do more. She didn't pressure him. She believed in process. Now, they talked about colors, venues, timelines. Conversations that once felt unrealistic now felt normal. David enjoyed that feeling the most, normalcy. Nothing felt rushed, nothing felt fragile. He didn't feel watched by life anymore. Some evenings, after work, he sat alone in his living room, lights dimmed, phone silent, just breathing. Peace didn't arrive loudly, it sat beside him. His business was steady, not wide, not volatile, just consistent. He had built systems that worked even when he stepped back briefly. His mother noticed the change also. She saw how relaxed he had become, how his shoulders didn't carry tension anymore, how his visits home felt lighter. She was proud of him, genuinely. She told people about him. She prayed for him with gratitude. At this point, nothing was wrong. There were no enemies, no threats, no warnings. Just a man who had done the work and was living inside the result. And for the first time in a very long time, David allowed himself to rest inside his success, without suspicion, without anxiety, without looking over his shoulder. He didn't know yet that stability has a way of attracting opinions, that peace sometimes invites interruption. He didn't know that the moment nothing is wrong is often when doubt begins to knock, not as danger, but as concern. One evening, David stopped by his mother's house after work. They sat outside, talking about ordinary things, food prices, neighbors, family gossip. Then, almost casually, his mother sighed and looked at him for a long moment. "David, you know," she said, "this is usually when people become careless." David laughed lightly. Careless? How? When things finally start going well. He didn't take her seriously. He thought she was just being a mother, protective, cautious, grateful. She had worried about him for years. It made sense that she would still worry now. But she didn't drop it. Over the next few visits, the comments returned. Never forcefully, never as an argument, just observations. Many people lose what they worked for because they relax too much. Success attracts eyes you don't see. Life is spiritual, David, especially when money enters. You need prophets to always cover you in prayers. David brushed it off. He reminded her that he worked hard, that his business was structured, that nothing magical brought him here. She nodded, she always nodded. But the comments continued. She told him stories, familiar ones. Someone who was doing well and suddenly fell sick. Someone whose business collapsed unexpectedly. Someone whose marriage scattered for no clear reason. She didn't say it would happen to him. She didn't need to. Fear doesn't arrive as a threat. It arrives as a suggestion. David tried to laugh it off. "Mama, not everything is spiritual attack." She smiled gently. "Of course not. But not everything is physical either." Weeks later, a small issue happened in his business. Not a disaster, just a delay. A payment that didn't come when expected. A contract that stalled. David had handled worse before. Normally, he would have adjusted and moved on. But this time, his mother called him that same evening. "I had a strange burden today," she said. "I couldn't rest." David didn't tell her about the delay yet. She continued, "Sometimes God allows small signs to warn us." That was when something shifted. Not panic, just discomfort. When David mentioned the delay casually, she seized it, not aggressively, but meaningfully. "You see, that's what I'm talking about." She didn't accuse enemies. She didn't shout. She simply said, "This is why people cover their success, so it doesn't attract problems." David felt irritated, but also unsettled. The delay resolved itself days later, but the seed had already been planted. He didn't like the thought, but he couldn't completely dismiss it either. Fear rarely feels logical, it feels possible. She began suggesting a prophet. A calm man, not controversial, known for prayers, not drama. Just prayers, she emphasized, nothing else. David refused again, but now, refusal didn't feel confident, it felt defensive. Each time something small went wrong, fuel scarcity, staff issues, delayed responses, the thoughts returned. What if he was being careless spiritually? Eventually, exhaustion made him give in. Not believe, just compliance. Let's go, he said one day, just so you will stop worrying. The prophet didn't look like what David expected. No flamboyance, no shouting, just a soft-spoken man who listened more than he talked. He prayed calmly, asked gentle questions, spoke about protection, not danger, about covering, not curses. David relaxed. This didn't feel manipulative, it felt harmless. The prophet didn't ask for money that day. He simply said, "You are in a season where many things are aligning. That is when people must be careful." The words sounded familiar. David returned home thinking nothing of it, but the visits continued, and slowly the language changed. Not drastically, just enough. The prophet began talking about sealing prayers, about ensuring things don't reverse, about obedience strengthening outcomes. David noticed that whenever prayer was mentioned, instruction followed. Pray for this number of days, pray at certain hours, avoid certain conversations. Then subtly came the seeds. If you want this prayer to stand, there is a sacrifice that seals it. David hesitated the first time, but the amount wasn't outrageous, and the fear was louder than the doubt. He paid. After that, it became normal. Every instruction came with a reason. Every prayer came with a condition. Every condition came with a cost. David told himself it was temporary, just until things stabilized fully, just until he felt completely secure. He didn't notice when he stopped questioning. Obedience became routine. When his mother asked if he had followed the prophet's instructions, he answered without irritation now, almost with relief. "Yes, I have." And that was the problem. His confidence wasn't returning. It was being outsourced. Each decision started to feel incomplete without confirmation. Each delay felt suspicious. Each challenge felt spiritual. Money began living quietly, not in large chunks at first. Small offerings, seeds, sacrifices. Nothing dramatic happened to his business yet, but peace was no longer natural. It had to be maintained, and David didn't realize it yet, but fear had learned his name. Not loudly, just well enough to call him whenever it wanted. By the time David noticed something was wrong, it wasn't loud enough to scare him. That was the problem. Nothing collapsed overnight. Nothing exploded. His life didn't crash. It thinned. At first, it showed up as pressure. Quiet pressure, the kind that doesn't announce itself but sits on your chest when you're alone. The prophet lifestyle began to change. David noticed it without meaning to. A new car appeared one day when he came for prayers. Not flashy, but clearly expensive. A few weeks later, another one replaced it. Then stories started circulating. Land bought, projects started, plans to expand the church. David felt happy for him. That alone should have worried him, because while the prophet's life was expanding, David's own life was tightening. His business still existed, but it no longer felt free. Cash flow became unpredictable, not disastrous, just strained. Payment delayed, expenses increased, profits shrank. Each time he mentioned it to the prophet, the response was calm. "This is normal resistance," the man would say. When things are about to stabilize permanently, pressure comes. And then came instructions, more fasting, more prayers, more sacrifices. David obeyed. He stopped seeing the money he gave as loss. He called it kingdom investment, protection, insurance for the future. Whenever doubt crept in, fear silenced it. What if this sacrifice is the one that finally seals everything? So he gave again and again and again. Soon, giving became scheduled, expected, almost automatic. David began selling small things to stay afloat. Nothing major at first, a spare gadget, a piece of land he wasn't using yet. He told himself it was temporary. He stopped updating his fiancée fully, not because he wanted to deceive her, but because he was tired of explaining, tired of seeing concern on her face, tired of defending decisions he no longer fully understood himself. She noticed the strain anyway. She noticed the way he paused before answering calls, the way his excitement about the wedding faded into silence, the way he stared at nothing some evenings. One day, she finally spoke. "You don't sound like yourself anymore." David shrugged it off. "I'm just under pressure." She hesitated, then said quietly, "Is this about that prophet?" David stiffened. She didn't attack him. She didn't mock his faith. She simply said words that echoed in his chest long after the conversation ended. "You built your life with discipline and consistency. This fear you are carrying, it wasn't there before." He snapped back defensively. "You don't understand spiritual things." She didn't respond immediately after saying that. She just watched him, not with anger, but with the kind of quiet sadness that comes when you realize someone you love is slipping away and shouting won't bring them back. After a while, she spoke again, slower this time. "David, do you remember how you used to pray before all this?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean before the visits, before the prophets, before his instructions, before the fear." She leaned forward slightly. "You prayed like someone talking to a father, not like someone trying to appease a judge." He shifted uncomfortably. "You used to pray with peace," she continued. "Now every prayer you pray sounds like negotiation." David scoffed. "That's not fair." She nodded gently. "Maybe, but listen to yourself. Everything is about sealing, covering, preventing loss. When did God become someone you had to constantly bribe so he won't change his mind about you?" That hit harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. She went on, carefully choosing her words. "You didn't meet God through fear, David. You met him through work, patience, and trust, through waking up every day and doing what was right, even when nothing was happening." She paused. "That is faith." David looked away. She reached for her Bible. She simply flipped a few pages and read softly. "The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it." She closed the book and looked at him. "David, tell me the truth. Is sorrow not being added now?" David swallowed. She wasn't finished. "Another one," she said, almost whispering. "God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind." Does this feel like a sound mind to you? Or does it feel like panic dressed up as obedience? David felt heat rise in his chest. "You are oversimplifying spiritual things," he said sharply. "You don't know what happens when people attack spiritually." She nodded again. "I know attacks happen, but I also know this." She paused, then spoke slowly. "God doesn't hide protection behind exhaustion." He frowned. She continued. "Every instruction you get leaves you more tired, more afraid, more broke. When did following God start draining everything you built?" He didn't answer. She sighed and leaned back. "Let me tell you a simple story," she said. "No scripture this time." David stayed silent. There was a man who finally harvested after years of drought. When the harvest came, someone told him, "You need to pay me so pests won't come." Another said, "Pay me so thieves won't steal." Another said, Pay me so the rain won't destroy it. She looked at him steadily. He kept paying until he had nothing left to harvest. David's jaw tightened. The funny thing, she continued, was that the same ground that survived drought was strong enough to survive rain, pests, and thieves. He just stopped trusting the soil because fear told him he needed middlemen. Silence filled the room. She didn't push. She simply added, "You are that farmer." David stood up abruptly. "Enough! You're disrespecting my faith." Her voice broke slightly. "No, David. I'm trying to save it." He paced the room, agitated. "You think you know better than spiritual authority?" He snapped. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes now, but her voice steady. "No, David. I think God knows better than fear." That stopped him. "David, listen to me carefully," she said. "You didn't start failing when you stopped giving enough. You started failing when you stopped trusting the foundation that got you here." She took a deep breath. "You are not under attack. You are under pressure. Pressure from someone who benefits from your fear." He shook his head. "You're wrong." But his voice lacked conviction. "If this prophet disappears tomorrow," she said quietly, "what happens to you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. David didn't answer. She stepped back, tears finally falling. "I can't compete with a voice that profits from your anxiety," she said. "And I won't." She wiped her face and looked at him one last time. "David, I love you, but I need you to choose whether you trust God or whether you trust fear wearing God's name." Then she turned away, leaving David standing alone in the room, surrounded by silence, scripture echoing in his head, and a truth he wasn't ready to face yet. Not because he didn't understand it, but because understanding it would mean admitting that everything he was doing was wrong. He stopped sharing details with her after that. As months passed, David's situation worsened. Clients reduced, debts piled. The systems he had built began to strain under pressure, and still, the prophet's voice remained steady. "This is the last stage," he would say. "Don't give up now." The amounts increased. David hesitated once, just once, and that was enough for fear to strike. What if this hesitation is what delays everything? So, he sold more. The house came next. Not entirely, just a portion. A loan against it, a temporary decision, he told himself, just until things bounced back. They didn't. The prophet's rise became impossible to ignore now. Church projects flourished, photos circulated, testimonies were shared, of people helped, of miracles happening. David listened quietly from the back when he attended services. No one knew he was the one funding much of it. And then, one day, he needed help. Not prayer, not instruction. Help. He called the prophet. No response. He tried again. The line didn't connect. He sent messages. No reply. Concern crept in. Not fear this time. Confusion. He went to the church. That was when everything cracked. A junior worker told him calmly, "Sir, the prophet has traveled." "When will he be back?" David asked. The man hesitated. "He has relocated abroad." The words didn't register immediately. Relocated? David asked for clarification. He was told plans had changed. Leadership had shifted. Communication would come later. David left the church feeling hollow. He tried calling again that night. The number was unreachable. Days passed, weeks, nothing. That was when reality hit him fully. There would be no explanation, no closure, no apology. The man he trusted with his finances, his decisions, his peace was gone. And David was alone with the consequences. His business couldn't recover in time. The debts were too heavy. The momentum was gone. The wedding was postponed, then quietly cancelled. His fiancée stayed longer than he expected, tried to understand, tried to help. But eventually, she said what she had been holding back. David, I can't build a future with someone who gives his life away so easily. It broke him, not because she was cruel, but because she was right. She didn't leave angrily, she left sadly. That hurt more. David sold the car, then more assets. Survival replaced growth. One evening, he sat alone in the same living room that once held peace. Only now, the silence felt heavy. He replayed everything, the warnings, the doubts, her words. Nothing destroyed him suddenly. He surrendered himself gradually. Fear didn't force him. Love didn't betray him. He handed his life over piece by piece, believing he was protecting it. And when he finally looked up, everything he built was gone. Trust is expensive, and David paid the full price. This story reminds us of something uncomfortable but necessary. Not every spiritual instruction is divine. Not every concern is wisdom. And not every calm voice is safe. Fear doesn't always shout. Sometimes it speaks gently, quoting scripture, offering protection, promising safety. But the moment you stop trusting the God who brought you this far and start handing your confidence to another man, you are no longer being led. You are being controlled. Faith should strengthen your judgment, not replace it. Prayer should give peace, not panic. And obedience should never cost you your clarity. Do not outsource your confidence in God to another man, because nothing destroys a life faster than fear wearing the language of faith. If you believe, comment I believe below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends and your loved ones. See you in the next one. Goodbye.